So I'm just out in the shop working on this Craftsman Snowblower here. It's a 924, and the guy snapped the drive cable. That's a common issue because on these machines they have these little cheap, they call it white metal, but I call it Chinesium. And the reason I do that is just because it's made in China, and usually they crack right at that corner there. So a little tip that I recommend is just to put some grease in there just to help it rotate. But anyways, on the drive side, you guys can see while I've taken the paint down, looks like I've been grinding on it. So what ended up happening was the fella broke his cable. Now the lower cable, that runs back to your actual system inside there. He only broke the top cable, and that goes down to a little plate here, and I can show you under here. I got all kinds of stuff, but that's the hole that I took it out of there. And then as your friction wheel wears down, you can put this lower to tighten it up and take slack out and adjust it. I like the ones that have the nut on the threaded rod because then you can really make a fine adjustment. Just replaced an auger cable that a guy snapped. We upgraded to the newer design where you can actually tighten it up and go in there and make adjustments. Whereas this one, sometimes I've found that this has been maybe too loose and that's been too tight, you know, so it all depends. And then sometimes you'll see that these will have different spaces between them, but in most cases they're fairly evenly spaced. But yeah, this one you really can't make a fine adjustment on it. But what happened was when he snapped his cable, he started to kind of waller out the hole, and I'll show you a picture of what it looked like. So basically I just went and took a flap disc on a grinder and cleaned all that up. And just using my welder here, I have a little Lincoln Electric, it's a weld pack. 155 with some argon gas. I use a little copper puck here, and you put the copper puck in behind there, and what that allows you to do is fill up the hole. I cleaned it all up first, and then I filled it as best I could, and then I went and using a set of vernier calipers, I measured from the outside edge to the center of the hole, and it was I think like 0.486, I believe. So then I ended up using my center punch, I marked my hole, and then I drilled a pilot hole, and then I finished it off with I believe a 7/32 drill bit. And it's kind of brand new now. And then I went in with a little round file just to clean up the edges here. So now what I'm going to do is hit this with some oil and grease remover, hit that with a little bit of black paint, and then I can go ahead and replace my cable. And oddly enough, I actually have another one of these machines in my shop that I just finished. So I got one here, and sorry for the mess, we got snowblowers and I'm tearing the Honda HTR apart over there. But yeah, this one we finished up for a customer. I had to do a carb clean and I believe an auger belt replacement. So this thing is ready to go back to him. But if you ever need to see if like a cable fits or something, yeah, having the exact same model, I mean, I was able to pull up a part number for that, and this one here has the exact same cable. So what ends up happening is over time, if it starts to get worn out, this kind of bends a little bit. You know, it starts to bend before it breaks, and what that'll do is it'll start to waller out the hole on this little steel bracket here, right, the lever. You know, it's little things like this that'll keep you busy, and you know, just easy, simple job. And you know, using my welder here, so a little filler weld, a little drilling, you know, it's a simple job, and then we'll get that cable replaced. The part number I believe was a 1501123MA. It was a 28.44L cable. So a little bit of paint. This thing looks brand new. It'll be good to go. I've cleaned up all the burrs. Now I just gotta wait on the cable to come in. And before I go ahead and hook up my cable, I'm just using a little bit of 3-in-1 white lithium grease here. This stuff works great, and it always stays nice and malleable, like nice and soft and lubricating, even in cold temperatures. So you just come down here on these. They have the little plastic wheel, and that's what your cable here rides on. So you guys can see there. And you're just ensuring that everything stays nice and lubricated so that nothing really binds up. Same thing with all of your points here, that anything that rotates, so when you get on your auger over here, you can see I've put a little bit of grease down there, and I can already tell it just rolls a little easier. You know, things move a bit nicer and they don't bind up as much. So when you bring your equipment to Eliminator Performance for any kind of repair or maintenance, I always try to do the best service I can. And for the extra 30 seconds or a minute that it takes me to shoot some lubrication onto certain points, for maybe the $1 or something that I charge my customer, in the end they're going to be happy, because in the future it may prevent a cable from snapping or something from binding up and breaking, which would then cost them more money in the future. For instance, the chute here, you know, there's a gear there, and there's a universal joint right here. So like I said, for the time it takes me to lubricate something like that, now it spins freely, it doesn't bind up, it doesn't squeak like it used to. So in my opinion, it's well worth the money. Now whether this machine runs or not, I'm not too sure. The only thing my customer said was that he snapped a cable and that he needed it replaced. And you know, that was just a little bonus piece, because if I didn't do that, I could put a brand new cable in, and because that hole, like you guys see in the picture, because that hole was slightly oblonged, it could bind up and it could break a brand new cable. And those cables, unfortunately, are like 20 bucks a piece. So for the time it took me to drill that hole and do what I did, I think it's well worth it, and my customer should be happy with this repair. So I got my cable here, and that's the cable that we needed right here, guys. So that's it, just a cheap little cable, and that'll fix it right up. And this here is what's happened to the old one. So the Chinesium is what I call it, broke away. Now I probably could have put this on the bottom end where that plate is, and then use the good end on the handle, but I didn't really want to do that because this could totally break away and let go, and then my customer would be stranded without a working machine. So for like the 20 bucks that a cable costs, it's ready to go. Okay, so I've got the new cable hooked up. Basically, you just route it through that little loop at the top of that bracket. Now, interesting little point. I was the one that put that permanent marker on the third hole down. So there's 1, 2, and then 3. So the cable, when it came off, was in the third hole. And I looked on the other machine, and they run it at the second hole and the second hole. And I'm feeling it right now with my lever engaging. And that feels like there's nice tension on there. So if I run it any tighter, chances are when I go to engage the handle, it will snap once again. So I'm just assuming that someone tried to get a little more tension out of their drive cable, and they took this cable and they put it into the third hole down, and they ended up snapping the cable. So this is the way it's supposed to be. And my little weld repair here works perfect. Check that out. There's no binding, there's no grinding, it's not grabbing at all. So I'm just going to hit that with the slightest amount of lubrication, and I'm going to take this thing outside and test it out. So what I was doing there is just basically a friction wheel test and also a belt test. So what you do is, if you ever want to check to see if your friction wheel is good and engaging properly and you have the correct tension on your cable, all you're going to do is, with the machine off, you're going to pull your drive and you're going to try to move your machine. And if it doesn't move, that means that the friction wheel is engaging in the plate at the bottom. Now the friction wheel and drive belt test is when the engine's running, you engage your machine, it starts pulling you forward, and what you're going to do is you're going to pull back as hard as you can, and if your snowblower continues to pull you forward, then that means there's proper tension on your friction wheel as well as your drive belt, and you know that nothing is slipping. So this cable replacement is good to go, and it's ready to go back to my customer, but the oil looked a little dark, so I'm going to just call him up, see if he wants an oil change, and that's it. So that's it for today's video. Just a quick little informational video about how I go about changing drive cables. And like I said previously, I could have probably just replaced the cable without welding and re-drilling that hole on the bracket, but if one of those little sharp edges ended up catching a new cable and breaking that, then we'd just be back to square one. So I went ahead, did what I did, and my customer was very pleased with it. If you guys enjoyed the video, think about leaving me a thumbs up. You know, it really helps me out. You can click over here to watch one of my previous videos, and click the EPV button to check out my brand new channel called EP Vlogs, where I'll be uploading all kinds of stuff that I don't want to post on this channel, and that does include death race. So go ahead and check out the new channel, and I'll see you guys here next week.